Dr. Frank Hollenbeck is back to tell you exactly what he thinks. Today we're going to be talking about an old idea, the Tobin Tax, which is a tax on financial transactions, and it's causing fresh problems. Basically, the UK Prime Minister, David Cameron, well, he's against the idea. Remember, London is a major financial hub. Nicolas Sarkozy, on the other hand, well, he very much likes the idea. So, Dr. Frank, what exactly will this tax achieve if it's introduced?
Well, we need to go back to the Tobin Tax. The purpose of the Tobin Tax was basically to punish speculators. The view, if you go back to 1971, we basically accused speculators for basically creating the collapse of the Bretton Woods system. The real cause of the collapse of the Bretton Woods system was because the US government was printing more money than the amount of gold that they had. In other words, they were financing government expenditures and the Vietnam War, and then ultimately they ended up printing more money than the available gold that they had, and that led to the dissolution of the Bretton Woods system. And we basically blame speculators that they forced governments to go off the gold standard, and we continue to blame speculators. Governments are always easy to blame speculators. I've seen people blame speculators for the real estate crash in 2008. Okay, everybody forgets the fact that the bubble was probably created by monetary policy in the United States. We're seeing it today. We're saying, well, it's speculators' fault that governments are no longer able to borrow. Forget the fact that the reason we're in such a mess has to do primarily with the monetary policy that we followed, the fact that banks can basically take your deposit and do anything they want with it, and even worse, which is the deposit insurance, which basically allows banks to privatize gains and socialize the losses. And in the case of Nicolas Sarkozy, he basically views that this problem is due to banks and that we didn't have enough regulation on banks. And he wants to, in a way, not only raise revenues, but he wants to basically penalize banks. He should really look at government policies which actually led to this particular problem. I've seen in the United States a lot of films that talk about the 2008 crash, and we've had films with Matt Damon that basically say it's the greedy bankers that are at fault, you know, it's the Goldman Sachs and everybody else. And I have a particular view, is if you're a kid, okay, and you have parents and they put you in a candy store and you pig out, okay, who's to blame? Is it the kid, the greedy bankers, or is it the parents, the central bank, for putting you in the candy store in the first place? And I think what history will show is when we actually look back, we'll see that a lot of the problems that we have today were caused by monetary policy, either in Europe or in the United States, that led us to the current situation that we're in.
But in the case of David Cameron, isn't it just a case that he's too scared of banks because they make up such an important part of UK GDP?
Yeah. Well, we can look at this Tobin tax. Like I said, the idea was that it would reduce volatility in the foreign exchange market and reduce speculation. First thing you have to understand about speculation, what it does is it actually speeds things up and actually makes things occur earlier than they otherwise would have, which is actually quite beneficial. Because of speculation, the demise of the Bretton Woods system occurred in 1971, maybe not in 1973. The housing bubble probably would have been worse if it hadn't been for speculators ultimately causing the crash of 2008. Now, we have to look at the Tobin tax. As an example, take what happened in Sweden between 1984 and 1990. They imposed a transaction tax on financial transactions, and it was a much higher tax that is being proposed. The current tax being proposed is 0.1%. Sweden imposed a 1% when you talk about round-trip trades. And they imposed actually even lower tax on bond transaction, derivative transaction. The tax was 0.003%. Now, what happened in Sweden? Basically, Sweden wanted to raise 1.5 billion kronas. Okay, just like today, we're hoping, Sarkozy says that he's hoping that it will raise between 50 and 55 billion euros. Okay? What actually happened is they raised between 50 and 80 million. Okay, not 1.5 billion, between 50 and 80 million. And if we consider the fact that we had less capital gains tax, probably it didn't raise anything. Okay, so the 55 billion we're talking about will probably be less than 10 billion in the end. Within a couple weeks, we basically had no more transactions in bonds, in futures contracts, and option basically disappeared. What we found between 1984 and 1990, almost 50% of the business in Sweden went to London. Ultimately, the Swedish government just took these taxes off. So it was a total failure in Sweden. What makes you think is going to be more successful here in continental Europe? Because again, we have London, that's right next door. We have Switzerland, that's right next door. There's going to be a lot of incentive to move the transactions overseas. Another thing is we're putting another first we're adding taxes on top of taxes that we're already adding. On top of that, we're going to put another monumental administrative structure on banks. I mean, already in banks, we have more compliance officers than we have loan officers. So, yeah, we'll raise taxes. We might raise some taxes, but it's not going to be really significant. It's not going to do anything to reduce the current situation we're in. We're not going to be able to raise so much taxes that we no longer have a debt problem.
Thank you, Frank. Dr. Frank Hollenbeck joining me there from the International University in Geneva. We'll be doing the same all over again on Monday with a fresh topic. But for now, goodbye.